Okay, we're recording at this time. For those that don't know me, my name's Cody Maxwell, Fannin County Extension Agent for Agriculture and Natural Resources. And before we start this this fertilizer presentation or webinar today, I want to first kind of back up just a minute to a presentation that we did a couple of weeks ago on soil testing. And feel free to ask these questions when we get done at the end. But there's an important part, even though we're focusing on fertilizers today, there's an important part that we talked about last time, and it's the pH on your soil test. And I'll point that out here in just a little bit where you can find that on your soil test. But I want to first make note that if your pH is not in a adequate environment for the grasses that you're growing, then the applying fertilizer is really not going to benefit us a whole lot. And that number that we may be looking at as far as our soil test from Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, once you drop below a 5.8, that's the critical limit, and that's when they're going to recommend applying limestone to buffer or neutralize that pH level that you have. Many times, those of you that might have been on a couple of weeks ago, remember that Bermuda grass can thrive in a moderately acidic environment. Many of our other grasses can thrive in a moderately acidic environment. And that moderately acidic environment drops down to about a 5.5 on that pH scale. So once we get below that, a 5.5, that's when we need to start looking at, all right, can we justify, can we fit into the budget applying limestone? Because if we don't, we run the risk of having fertilizer leaching that can take place on it, which will essentially be wasting our money on the fertilizer. So again, we'll take any questions that you may have on limestone application. I've got some slides that we can show you on that to show you how to make some mathematical adjustments based on the ECCE, the equivalent calcium carbonate, the effective calcium carbonate equivalents that we have on that fertilizer. So we can go through that if we need to later on. So fertilizer calculators. I want to start off by giving you a couple of websites here, and I'll make this presentation available to any of you that may need it. But these are two websites that you can go to obtain a fertilizer calculator. If you've never done a fertilizer calculation before, there's no need to worry. We're going to walk you through that today. And I'll specifically be using the first link there, the soiltesting.tamu.edu. The second one is a fertilizer calculator that is available through the Noble Research Institute. They have several apps, just as Texas A&M AgriLife Extension has as well. But that's just another alternative resource for you right there in utilizing those fertilizer calculators. I'll show you what those websites look like here in just a little bit, and we'll walk you through doing a fertilizer calculation. So many of you that have applied fertilizers before, I'm going to jump forward to this slide, and then we're going to back up. So if you look on the right-hand side there, you see fertilizer recommended. And on this particular one, you have 55 pounds of nitrogen per acre, 55 pounds of P2O5, so that's your phosphate per acre, and then 10 pounds of K2O, which is your potash that you would apply per acre. So that's what a soil analysis is going to look like. We'll talk more in depth about it here in a little bit. But on that right side, you're going to see fertilizers recommended. Now, I'm going to back up to this slide. So you'll see there on the second bullet point, there's 3 blanks and 2 dashes there. And so many of you that have applied that know that when a fertilizer blend is formulated, it's formulated into a blend. And it's not going to show 55, 50, and 10, or 55, 55, and 10 like that last soil analysis that you looked at. In that case, it's going to be 19, 19, 3. And so when you look at that, you're like, well, I've got 19, 19, 3. How in the world does that correlate to 55, 55, 10. And it can become quite confusing, especially the first time that you're applying fertilizer. In some cases, it can become quite intimidating. And that's what this presentation's for, is we don't want it to be intimidating. We want to at least give you somewhat of an understanding, and at least give you some knowledge to take away from this, to be able to take that soil analysis into a fertilizer dealer, hand it to them, have the calculation done. You have a calculation done prior to going up there, and then that way you can see what they're giving you, match it up with your calculations, match that up with the soil analysis, and know that that blend that you're getting is the proper amount and exactly what you need. So again, back to this fertilizer blend having 3 numbers. So those 3 numbers are the units or percentage of each nutrient that's in that blend. So that first number is going to represent our nitrogen or our nitrate. The second number is going to represent our phosphorus or our phosphate in this case, a fertilizer. And the third number, the 3, is going to represent our potassium or our potash in the case of a fertilizer. So what does it mean whenever you have this blend? Well, you look at those dashes and that equals 100%. And so when we're looking at this on a unit or a percentage basis, what these numbers mean is it has, this particular fertilizer blend has 19 units or 19% in 100 pounds of fertilizer, because those 3 numbers represent 100 pounds of fertilizer. So the first number, nitrogen, we have 19% or 19 pounds within 100 pounds of fertilizer. The second number means, and again, that number's 19 in this case, means that we have 19 units, or within 100 pounds of fertilizer, we have 19 pounds per 100 pounds of phosphate in that fertilizer blend. Skipping down to the third number, being 3, means that we have 3 units or 3 pounds within 100 pounds of fertilizer of potash or the potassium that we're applying into that soil. So that gives us that 1919-3. So you're probably sitting there thinking, well, my fertilizer calls for 55 pounds of N, 55 pounds of P2O5, and 10 pounds of K2O, the potash. So why in the world am I just putting down 19 pounds of nitrogen, 19 pounds of phosphate, and then 3 pounds of K2O, the potash? That's when we increase our amount of application, pounds of application per acre to get up to that. And hopefully I haven't lost anybody yet. Again, it can get a little confusing, but I'm gonna try to go as slow as possible and set the stage right here with this basic, or not basic, but this particular blend that's going to correlate with one of our soil tests. So we'll help kind of walk you through this. So I want to move next to talk about, all right, you heard us talk about those 3 numbers that we have in a fertilizer blend. The first one's going to represent nitrogen, second P2O5, which would be your phosphate, and third is going to be the potassium, the K2O, which will be your potash. And so there, as far as nitrogen is concerned, we have 2 different types of fertilizer that are going to represent nitrogen for us in a blend of fertilizer. And one of the most common ones is going to be urea. And so I've put these formulations up here for you. So there again, we're on urea right there, the first number's nitrogen, second number's phosphate, third number is potash. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are the 3 numbers. So as you can see in urea, there's 46 units of nitrogen that makes up urea. Or in other cases, if you apply 100 pounds per acre of urea, that means you're getting an actual 46 pounds of urea applied per acre. Moving over to the ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate, its formulation is 32-O-O. So that means that there's 32 units of nitrogen in ammonium that makes up ammonium nitrate. Therefore, if we apply 100 pounds of ammonium nitrate per acre, then we're getting an actual 32 pounds per acre. Right now, roughly, this is on the average, and this is kind of an average price of urea that we're seeing right now. It's going to cost you about $385 per ton. That's kind of the price that you're looking at. We'll get into some prices here in a little bit when we're formulating these blends. We're just trying to, it may not sound like baby steps, but we're trying to take baby steps towards doing a calculation for our particular places. So whenever we're blending phosphorus or phosphate into a blend, the makeup of phosphate is going to be it's going to come in the form of diammonium phosphate, and the makeup of diammonium phosphate is 18-46-O. So we got 18 units of nitrogen, 46 units of phosphate, P2O5, and 0 units of potassium or potash. In other words, if we apply 100 pounds of diammonium phosphate per acre on our property, we're going to be applying an actual 18 pounds of nitrogen and 46 pounds of phosphate to that soil. Price on it on the average right now, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's about $435 per ton. Then we move down to potash, which is going to be our form of applying or of increasing that potassium content, potassium nutrient within the soil. So the makeup of potash is going to be 0-0-60. So that means there's 0 units of nitrogen, 0 units of phosphate, and 60 units of K2O in this blend or in this fertilizer. So if we apply 100 pounds of potash per acre, we're going to be applying an actual 60 pounds of potash per acre. And that right now, here in our area, is running about $380 a ton. All right, we're going to move into doing some calculations here. So I'm going to go back to that original soil test that we looked at here. So first, I'm going to take you over to the left-hand side. So we're in the yellow and white section right here in the middle of this chart and this bar graph running across. So you go over to the far left-hand side, and this may be a review for some of you, but for those that didn't get to see it, I want to point this out. The very first line is going to be pH right there. So you can see on this particular soil test, the pH of this soil is 5.9. That very next column right there on the first row, you can see that the critical limit for the pH, which is going to be our threshold, you could say, is 5.8. So when we go below 5.8, move down to the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and you'll see the limestone requirement right there. In this particular one, since it's not below 5.8, it's recommended, it doesn't have a recommendation for limestone, so we don't have to lime this particular place. So I just want to point that out. When we get to the end, I'll be happy to take any questions on limestone or show any slides that we need to show on that. All right, now to the far right-hand side of your screen under fertilizer recommendations. So you see we've got 55 pounds of nitrogen, 55 pounds of P2O5, 10 pounds of K2O. Another one I'll point you to is sulfur, and this is one that we didn't point out, but this particular one is recommended 5 pounds of sulfur per acre. We can move into looking at maybe some ammonium sulfate is our blend. applying that in our blend to potentially get some sulfur in there, or there may be some that utilize sulfur in a filler standpoint. So we, in this case, we want to address the sulfur, but as far as the calculation goes, we're going to look at the top 3 numbers. So I'm going to stop my share on this screen for just a minute, and we're going to move to this screen. So I told you if you didn't get that website down a while ago on the fertilizer calculation, this is the home page of our soil testing lab at College Station for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. So you can go to soiltesting.tamu.edu, and then we're going to scroll down to the bottom here, and you can see these different tabs down here. This one right here is the fertilizer calculator. Click on that. Then you can see the different ones. We've got an urban fertilizer calculator, another urban fertilizer calculator. Those are going to be for your homes, lawns, gardens, your landscape areas, and I'll show you how to use those here in a little bit too. But the one we want for this case, for over an acre in size, we want to use the agriculture fertilizer calculator. All right, so as we're walking through here, this will be what will come up, and it's a fillable database, and so you can customize this for yourself, for your fertilizer dealer that you utilize, and it will save it on there. I went in yesterday and I put in these numbers that you would see. The price per tons over here, and scroll down and show you what the rest of this looks like. When we get done doing this, we're going to, down here in the summary of our calculations, it's going to tell us exactly how much pounds per acre to apply of each one of these. It's going to give us a cost, total weight of our fertilizer, and total cost per acre. So that's our end goal, what we're trying to get to here, that we can print out and take into a fertilizer dealer. So there's some things that you'll have to fill in. So first and foremost, before doing this, whatever fertilizer dealer that you're going to use, you want to call them and ask them what source of nitrogen they're going to be using. Everybody around North Texas that I know, the fertilizer dealers, as far as the phosphate and the potash, they're all going to be using the one blend, or the one blend for each one of those. Nitrogen is where we can get into some different sources of nitrogen. And so you want to call them and ask them what their source of nitrogen is, whether it's going to be urea or ammonium nitrate. Or in some cases, you might find ammonium sulfate or maybe some other different types of sources. But nonetheless, we're looking for that nitrogen number. You go over here to this drop-down box, and I've been able to select urea is 46-0-0. So I put my 46 in the box. If it was going to be ammonium nitrate, I'll select 32-0-0. In this case, I'm going to use urea, 46-0-0. I've got my 385 per ton over here. Then we go down, same thing, drop down boxes for diammonium phosphate, 18-46-0. And we got 435 per ton there. Then our third fertilizer, or our source of potassium, or K2O, or potash, is 0-0-60. We go to our third number, select 60, and we've got 380 per ton. So I want you to think back to that soil test that I just showed you, and just for sake of time, I'm not going to go back and share that screen right now at this moment, but we had 55 units of nitrogen, 55 units of, or excuse me, we need to apply 55 pounds of nitrate, 55 pounds of phosphate, P2O5, and 10 pounds of potash, K2O. So up here in the top, my soil test recommended nutrient rate pounds per acre. If you remember the wording back on that soil test analysis, that was the exact wording that we saw on there. I'm going to go in this block right here, and I'm going to put in 55 because that's what it required for my nitrogen. In the second space, I'm going to put 55 as well because that's what it was calling for of the pounds per acre on my phosphate. On this one, I'm going to put 10 because that's what it was recommending for my pounds of K2O. So in doing that, I'm going to click enter, and everything's been formulated. So now we go down here to the bottom. Excuse me there, clicked on the wrong thing. So to get 55 pounds of nitrogen per acre, we're going to have to apply an actual 119.6 pounds per acre of urea. We're also going to have to apply same number, 119.6 actual pounds of diammonium phosphate. And then it's going to be an actual 16.7 pounds of the potash. So in this fertilizer blend, we're going to have to, when they blend all of this together, we're going to have to apply 255 pounds per acre of this blend to get 55 pounds of nitrogen, 55 pounds of phosphate, and 10 pounds of potash. So how that works in this case is 40 acres is what this particular area is that's being fertilized. So to blend it, they would actually have to put, so if we did 119.6 times 40 acres, then they'll have to put 4,784 pounds of urea into that weigh hopper that they'll have at the fertilizer dealer. Then they're also going to have to put 4,784 pounds of diammonium phosphate into that weigh hopper. And then they're going to have to put 668 pounds of potash into that weigh hopper, because that's going to be the total amount for the whole area represented that's going to have to go in there. So we'll actually have, apologize for, I'm doing some calculations here. So that weigh hopper is going to have 10,236 pounds in it. And then when we divide that by tons, which would be 2,000, which is a term that many fertilizer dealers are going to use. So in our buggy that we drive away with after it's mixed all together, we're going to have 5.1 tons in there is what we're going to have of the total amount of fertilizer to apply that. And then whenever I get to my place with that fertilizer buggy, there's going to be a chart on the back of that fertilizer buggy, and there's going to be a crank that you can turn that's going to have a door on the back side of that fertilizer buggy. It's going to lift it up and lower it. And so what that does is there's settings on there, and for each mark, or for each inch or quarter inch or half inch that you raise that, it's going to represent, based on your speed that you're traveling, the amount of fertilizer that's being put out per acre. So in this case, when they blend all that together, I want to make sure that I'm putting 255 pounds down to the acre to get, going back to that soil test or soil analysis, 55 pounds of nitrate, 55 pounds of P2O5, the phosphate, and 10 pounds of the K2O. Another important thing is, a cow-calf producer, I am operating off of a budget, obviously. And I like to spray my pastures to eliminate weed competition. And I hope that I can fertilize my pastures to help promote yield throughout the growing season, and plenty of forage for the cattle. But also I make projections to when I'm going to sell my calves, the amount of money that I'm going to have to work with. Also, we want to make sure that we figure in if we've got loan payments in there on the cattle, or hay equipment, whatever the case may be. We want to make sure that we have that figured into our input cost. There's a little number right down here at the bottom. $52.21 to the acre is what it's going to cost me to apply that. If that fits the budget, then I'll go the full rate. If it doesn't, we always say that some fertilizer is better than none. So if that doesn't fit your budget, all we do is go right back up here to the top, and we say, well, let's see what I can do. What if I apply 40 pounds of nitrogen per acre, 40 pounds of phosphate to the acre, and I'll leave that potassium as it is. We just dropped it down to $38.84 to the acre. We decreased our application rate by 65 pounds. And so the fertilizer calculators are so helpful because it allows you to do this. As all of us, you probably don't want to sit there and talk about, what you have to spend to a salesman. Obviously, if you can afford the whatever it's going to cost you to apply that fertilizer, if it fits the budget and you can afford it, by all means do it, because you're gonna reap the benefit on the other end in yield production and yield potential of that forage for the hay or the cattle situation. This fertilizer calculator gives you an opportunity to sit there, just as I am right now, to look through this particular fertilizer or soil analysis and figure out what fits the budget. You can do that in the confines of your own home without anybody around and say, well, I've got $40 an acre to spend on fertilizer. How am I going to be able to do that and get the most bang for my buck on what I can apply out there and do the best to my property? This gives you the opportunity to do that. I'm going to stop this share, and we're going to go back to another one. I appreciate everybody hanging in there. It looks like everybody's still with us, and so I know that some of this stuff gets pretty deep and can be pretty confusing. But we're here to help. We're here if you have any questions. I'm gonna move on with the presentation here. Got some more slides I'd like to show you. Again, same situation here, different situation. On this slide, the one that I've been referring to the whole time, if you'll look there, it says crop grown, improved in hybrid Bermuda grass for grazing. Now that goes back to the information that we put in on that soil test whenever we send it in. This particular one is common Bermuda grass, one cutting of hay plus grazing. And so you can see, and again, this is from a completely different place, but we got to apply 60 pounds of nitrogen per acre, 45 pounds of phosphate, and then the 5 pounds of sulfur down there below. This pH is at a 7.1, so basically perfect pH right there on this property. Another one here, this is moving into some native grass, blue stem. So our native grasses, we're probably looking at best 2 cuttings of hay on the average for native grass. As far as grazing situation, they're gonna be moving towards their peak long about after the 4th of July, moving into August and 1st of September is when we'll see them start reaching maturity. And so in a hay situation, we're probably looking at best 2 cuttings of hay. But they're not going to respond as much to the nitrogen fertilizer as Bermuda grass will, as we've mentioned in some other presentations and webinars that we've done. So you can see that the fertilizer recommendations are quite a bit lower here. And I'm just kind of skipping through some of these here. I've got some points we'll bring out here in a little bit. So little different situation here. 35-acre place, a 5.9 pH. We've got ryegrass here with moderate grazing. And so we've got 120 pounds of nitrogen required right here, 40 pounds of phosphate, 20 pounds of potash. Once you go down here to the, and I don't know if y'all can see my cursor moving or not, but if you can, right here at the down here in the fine print, it says apply half of the nitrogen at pre-plant and top dress remainder of the nitrogen 4 to 6 weeks after 4 to 6 weeks of grazing. So we're not going to apply 120 pounds of nitrogen whenever we go in there and initially fertilize this place. We're going to go in and apply 60 pounds of nitrogen and then come back after we're grazing this. After we have a graze down, apply 60 pounds to get that grass back up there growing again. This fine print is very important. I've seen many soil tests in which the phosphate or the potash will be in excess of 100 pounds per acre. On those particular ones, we don't want to apply any more than 75 pounds or 70 to 75 pounds per acre at a time. And so make sure you read that fine print down there. Homeowner fertilizers, that's just some that we can look at there. I'm going to skip forward to some things right here, and we can go back if some of you have questions on the homeowner fertilizers and answer those for fertilizing a garden or landscape trees or something of that matter. So when to apply fertilizer? We've been talking about this for a few weeks now about, when's our weather here in North Texas going to get to the point of allowing us to be able to apply this fertilizer to warm season perennials. Some people have already done such, especially in Bermuda grass hay situations in which we've gone in, we've controlled all the cool season grasses. We've tried to promote an early green up to hopefully get a cut in the hay by the end of May, 1st of June. So some cases have already been applied. In our pasture situations or in some other hay situations, we've been waiting for those nightly temperatures to reach 60 degrees plus consistently. We've been waiting on a soil temperature to get 65 degrees. That is our threshold in which we can justify going and knowing confidently that we can apply that fertilizer and it be utilized the way that we want it to be. Nightly temperatures get 60 to 65 degrees consistently, and soil temperatures reach 65 degrees. And so that lets you know when to apply that fertilizer. The next bullet point there for warm season perennials, and we're referring to Bermuda grass or Bahia grass, those that really respond to our fertilizer application. For them to fully utilize it, it needs to be applied after green up in an actively growing state. Because when that grass isn't in an actively growing state, it's not uptaking that fertilizer and moving along and growing in a way that we want it to. The other thing that you run into, some of you in the pasture situations may have seen this or might be questioning this, or if you're in a hay situation as well and you haven't done any cool season weed control, if you apply fertilizer too early in the spring, our cool season grasses, forages, Weeds in some cases are going to utilize that fertilizer as opposed to our warm season perennial grasses. So that's just something that we want to keep in mind when we're looking at that. All right, when's the time for me to apply a fertilizer? That's our time to do it right there. Very important slide right here. Nutrient deficiencies and fertilizer loss. In a hay situation, whether it be cool season or whether it be warm season, whatever we're utilizing for hay, anytime we go in there and harvest that hay and take that hay away, we're removing nutrients. Whereas in a grazing situation, when an animal comes along, consumes that forage, the manure piles, when they go to the bathroom out there on the pasture, it's a recycling process that takes place of our fertilizer out there. Many times we want to try to spread that around if we can, because you'll start seeing over time, you've probably seen these large clumps of grass all over your pasture. Well, that's probably from a manure patty where an animal went to the bathroom out there on the pasture. So if we don't spread it around, we can start seeing that. But in a hay situation, when we go in there and we take that forage away from the ground, that those nutrients, that fertilizer that we may have applied is gone up and being utilized and uptook by that plant, and we just took it away. So the second bullet point right there tells you exactly how much we take away. So if we apply 60 pounds of, or I'm going to go back to that original one, if we apply 55 pounds of nitrogen per acre, 55 pounds of phosphate, and 10 pounds of potash, we are going to take all of that 55 pounds of nitrogen away in one hay cutting. 14 pounds of phosphate and 42 pounds of potash is what is taken away in one hay cutting. So if you're in a hay situation, make sure and specify that on the soil test. More importantly, make sure you're soil testing at least once a year. Many times those soil tests are going to have, we've seen the initial recommendations over there on the right-hand side of that soil test that we looked at. Down in the bottom in the fine print, many times in a hay situation, you're going to see after each hay cut and apply 40 to 60 pounds of additional nitrogen per acre. We probably applied that initially, so we just took it all away with that hay. Got to go back and put it all down again. What happens if you don't? We've got I don't want to call it a disease. It's a diagnosis that we have, or a condition that we can see in our Bermuda grass hay meadows, Bermuda grass pastures too, that's called Bermuda grass decline. And when we're not applying that nitrogen that needs to be applied, what ends up happening is these unwanted grasses, these unwanted weeds can come in and thrive in low fertility environments. In this case, in low nitrogen environments. We've seen, many of you have probably experienced this, but we see threons come in. We see KR blue stem. We see broom sedge blue stem. They come in. Many of you have seen us give presentations about the orange grass, or you've seen emails that we sent out about the orange grass that you see during the dormant season out across these meadows and pastures. And that's that broom sedge blue stem. That's an unwanted grass. Is very low in palatability to cattle, is really only palatable to an extent early on in the growing season, which we're in right now. But when we're not applying that nitrogen that soil is requiring for our endeavors on the property, we have these unwanted grasses that come in. And many times our warm season perennial grasses are an investment. They're an investment that we want to protect. We can protect them a little bit easier than we can investments in other endeavors in life, because we as a manager have control of the yield potential of that, except the rainfall. Our management strategies, our best management practices is what we have control of. And so we can protect our investment through those things. Moving on, deficiency in nitrogen, some telltale signs that we can see the grass telling us what's going on within it. Whenever we have a pale green color on a grass, then it generally tells us that we're low in nitrogen, which is going to decrease the protein content in that. Whenever we're deficient in phosphorus, we usually have a poor root system, prevents forage from optimum yields. This is when we start seeing that Bermuda grass decline a lot, is deficiencies in phosphorus and potassium, because potassium is yield loss and stand loss. Another one, soil test here. We've shown quite a bit of those throughout this. So another slide here on when to apply fertilizer. So when you're establishing Bermuda grass, whether it be sprigging or seeding, we had some sprigging that took place this last week, 2 weeks here in the county. You know, we're in the time right now that is suitable for planting Bermuda grass. But when applying fertilizer, we can apply the phosphorus and the potassium pre-plant. Now, if you remember back to that diammonium phosphate formulation, there was actually 18 units of nitrogen within that. So if you're putting down diammonium phosphate pre-plant, you are going to get some nitrogen there. That's okay. Just that remaining nitrogen that you have left on that recommendation, come back and apply that in a top dress situation during the actively growing state. Why soil test and fertilize? The benefit's yours. The benefit is for your livestock. The benefit is for your business, whether it be a livestock situation, a hay situation, whatever the case may be, the benefit is yours. You will get the money back out of fertilizer. We could show you some slides on in this case right here, a cool season annual forage program right there, in which fertilizer was applied. We can show the amount of hay supplementation that you can reduce through doing this, what the numbers look like. But again, the benefit is yours. Yield potential is what defines it all. And that's what I think we're all trying to do when it comes to a forage management standpoint, is increase yield potential. We increase yield potential, that means more tons per acre on our hay harvest. That means more pounds per acre of yield potential as far as grazing that we have available. May mean we can increase our carrying capacity on a particular property with the increased yield potential that we see. So why soil test and why fertilize? Because it is going to benefit you in all different types of ways. There it is on the hay situation that we just talked about. So in summary, you may be asking yourself, well, how often do I soil test? You know what, as far as fertilizer, what I do? In a pasture situation, soil test once every 2 to 3 years. Again, in a pasture, if it's being utilized by livestock, we are able to have some fertilizer recycling that takes place out there. In a hay meadow, you want to soil test once a year. Again, pay close attention to the fine print on there. Pay close attention to your soil test recommendations. If it fits the budget, do that. Apply your initial recommendation and come back after every hay cutting and apply that additional nitrogen that needs to be applied. If you want better pastures, if you want better hay meadows, we've got to be practicing best management practices on these properties. If we fail to replace these nutrients when they're taken away, that's when we have the stand loss that we talked about. There's my contact information.